Hello and welcome to the Flipside. And I'm your host, Dr. Michael Nichols. And I have to tell you, I'm so excited today. We have a great guest today on the show, and it's someone that I've wanted to speak to for a long time. And I'm glad that I'm going to get the opportunity today. And I'm glad that you guys are going to get the chance to meet this individual and hear the words that they say. And it's really an appropriate time to have this person on. So without further ado, let me introduce my guest today, Roman, and I'm probably going to totally butcher his name. I'm going to have to make sure I get the name correct here. Bystrianyk. And so I'm going to admit him into the program here and introduce you guys. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi. Is it working?
It is working. First thing I have to ask is, how do I pronounce your last name appropriately? Because I always say I'm probably butchering it.
Smith.
There you go. That's a much easier approach.
Just call you can
say
you can
Bystrianyk.
That's good. I mean, I just use Roman, but if you want to use my official name, you can do that too.
Is that the appropriate way to say it?
Yeah. Bystrianyk. Yeah.
Bystrianyk. Very
Well, that's
good.
what my dad told me. I don't know. Maybe it was lying. Could be wrong.
Well, as a dad myself, there are things we keep from our kids. So,
Yeah, that's
that is
true.
Well, welcome to the Flip Side. I'm very excited to have you today. For those who do not know Roman and his background, I'm going to let him describe his background for you. But this book, Dissolving Illusions, which was it 2013 or 2015 that it was written?
13, yeah.
13. And then it was rewritten again recently.
Yeah, 10-year anniversary kind of thing.
Yeah. So I will tell you that this was a very powerful book, I thought.
There's a horrible picture on the back, though. It's a cheesy mustache picture.
I thought that was Tom Selleck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that looked like Tom Selleck there.
Yeah, I do have the Hawaiian shirt there going. I don't even want to put that picture up. I guess.
I think it looks.
Actually, when I published, I thought it's no big deal. I figured I'd sell a couple hundred copies, so I never really thought it was going to be a big thing anyway. So.
You did. So here's the interesting thing, because Dr. Humphreys, of course, is all over the place. So I think most people are familiar with Dr. Humphreys a little more than you when it comes to this topic. She's been on whatever countless shows. She was on Joe Rogan recently.
Yeah.
But your background was not in medicine. It was computer sciences, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I had no idea about vaccines. Didn't care. Didn't know anything about it when I started.
So what led you into this? It's because it's not a place that most people just kind of find themselves being, so.
So I went through a bunch of health challenges myself. So I ended up listening to various health programs, and one of them was Gary Null. So I ended up listening to Gary Null, and he would have autism, neurological damage kind of discussions once in a while. And I had young kids, or kids on the way. I think they were younger actually. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound too good. I need to know more about that. And so I just picked up a few books and started paging through. And really a lot of credit goes to Neil Miller, because he had this little booklet on vaccines, a real small thing.
Yeah,
and I picked it up and I'm paging through it, and there's a chart showing decline in mortality rate in measles by 95% before there was a vaccine. And I thought, the guy's off his nut. That doesn't make any sense. And I actually took the book and I threw it on my coffee table, and I was like, that guy's a nutball. Forget about it. Just don't worry about it. But it kept on nagging me. So I ended up going to a local library and looking at almanacs, just regular almanacs. And I was able on the third one to find this kind of data every 10 years, measles mortality. And I had a little piece of graph paper. So this is a little while ago. And I charted it and was like, hey, that's basically the same chart. I was like, I sat there for quite a while just looking at that. It's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. That can't be true. And even when I did that, I still didn't believe it. So I decided I'm going to go to Yale Medical and get the real data. I'm going to get real official government data. And I did that, even though I didn't know what I was looking for. I found these books called U.S. Vital Statistics.
Right.
And after photocopying, again, a long time ago, all these different pages, I took it back to my, engineering workstation spreadsheet, and I put all the data in, which was copy, manually typing everything. You couldn't just cut and paste.
Sure.
And so I did that, and I had all this data, and I started putting in things like whooping cough and scarlet fever. I'm like, well, what's that? All these different types of things, which I've never heard of because that wasn't like my thing. I didn't study any of that. And I did my first chart, and I did my first measles chart. I was like, boom, there it was. It was like, oh, we're down 98% before there was a vaccine.
Blew your
And
mind.
and that got me really interested. It's like, well, why don't I know this? And same thing happened with whooping cough. Whooping cough was down 90%. And I was like, what? No, that can't be right either. None of it made any sense to me. So it took me a long time to look at the data and double check it and triple check it and quadruple check it because I must have done something wrong. As an engineer, I'm trained to go find out what I did wrong first, right? Make sure everything is just right. So that was always my, default position. And I thought, well, I must have done something wrong. I must misunderstand something. And I just kept on hammering at it until I was convinced the data was right and the conclusion was right, but I just didn't know why. And then I ended up getting data from England. I don't recall how I hooked up with this dude. He sent me all the English data. And then I started going to library. I became obsessed. I just became
How many
obsessed with.
years did this go on?
I don't really. I mean, I started in '98 or so, and I just went on and on for 15 years, more or less, on and off. Because something, this was not my main thing to do in life. I would work on it and then like, forget this. I got other things to do, and then get back to it. I even actually started a book first, and then I deleted the whole thing. I was like, I'm not going to do this, and then I restarted a second time. But anyway, I got this data from England, and I went to these libraries because you had to go. It wasn't all this stuff wasn't online, so I went to the New York history library there, medical history, and I got a lot of data from there. That was a cool experience because you couldn't even touch the books; you had to use a pencil, and they would
Uh,
photocopy everything for you. And I went to Boston, I went to Los Angeles, I went a bunch of places. And I took all that data for England and New York and Massachusetts, and these different places. But I finally got all the England data, England and Wales data I could possibly get. And I put it in the spreadsheet just like I did with the US data. The US data starts in 1900. England started in 1838. They were way
wow.
ahead of the game.
Wow.
So I charted it, and what you see is, a really high rate of death until around 1875, and it starts going down, 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 down. And they started vaccinating in 1968 for measles. Well, you're down 100% almost by the time they vaccinated. Same thing with whooping cough, almost down 100%. And so then, this blew my mind. And there was data from Massachusetts, so it showed the same thing. And what it showed is all the infectious diseases went down at the same time.
Right.
Pretty much they all went down. They all trended towards zero. Some things went to zero that we don't do anything about. Scarlet fever went to zero, typhoid zero, typhus zero, cholera zero. I mean, who dies of cholera in the Western world? So all
Right.
these things went to zero. But for some reason, these couple of things that were close to going to zero, we have to vaccinate for. It's kind of, and it was like blew my mind. I was like, this can't be, I still, even now, I'm like, how can that even be true? It's like crazy. It's not even close. If it was the vaccine, the death rate would have stayed high, and then it would just, here's the vaccine, boom, then it would just plummeted. Instead, it's completely opposite. And so then it got me interested in, well, what did happen? And so I started reading all that, reading all the history of life was not a really a barrel of peaches back in the 1800s. It was really brutal.
To put it mildly, right?
Yeah, it was brutal. So
There was
that's, yeah,
a passage in here that struck me, like really struck me, that connects with exactly what you're just saying there. And I can't quote it verbatim, but it had something to do with rivers of sewage
yeah,
running through the city or something like that. And I was
yeah.
like, oh, just
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. So imagine you're in London, and you have the West End of London. That's where the wealthy people lived. East end of London was a slum. I mean, really horrible. And there was no piped water, there's no sanitation, so you went to the bathroom. We'll call it going to the bathroom. You defecated and urinated, and it would where would it go? It would go into the streets or it would go into cesspools, and then eventually it would overflow into the Thames. That was your drinking supply. Holy cow! And so the animals would be brought into the city too for slaughter, and
Right.
so they also have to go to the bathroom, and that would go in the streets, and everything was transported by horses. So that also into the streets and into the water supply.
And the slaughter was going into all the
Yeah.
entrails and the blood and
Well, we're not even talking about the industrial waste from
right,
tanners, et
right.
cetera. All that stuff went in. So you're basically drinking from a giant industrial toilet.
So crazy.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, they would actually put it into these big bins, the water, and let it settle. So all the most of the waste would go towards the bottom. So it's just like nobody would even like consider drinking this. But if you're in that environment and that's what you had to drink, what are you going to do?
Right.
That's what you would drink. And you can't imagine anybody being even remotely healthy doing that, right? So people would tend to, drink beer because that was cooked. So that would be probably a better option at that time. And this also, people used to do crazy things, drink a lot of gin and things like that. But so you have a giant industrial toilet. That's where, and your food was, there's no refrigeration. So you end up having rotting food because it's slaughtered. It's not, you don't get it right away. It's not sitting in the grocery store. And so you might get it, days later. Well, and there's no screens, so the flies would land on it. And it's like, ugh. Or if you got fish, it would be start getting slimy on the docks. It depends on when you got it. And so a lot of things were very, you know, not good. So
Oh my
that's the
gosh.
food. And on top of that, you were working as a poor person just to stay alive, for 12, 14, 16, 18 hours a day. And then children were also working in mines and factories, as young as 4 years old. So they didn't have any kind of, grow up childhood life at all. They just grew up weak, miserable, bloodless is one of the quotes.
Bloodless.
So it was an awful situation. And then you also had industrial smog, which was they called the London fog. When I was a kid, I thought that was, well, it's very foggy in London. No, that means that was all the soot and smoke. And sometimes it was so bad you couldn't even see during the day. And so you're breathing this into your lungs. Well, not good. So you have all these
Yeah.
different factors involved. And then you had crazy medical notions like bleeding. They bled people for everything.
Leeches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they would just bleed you with a lancet. They
Yeah.
would take it and remove a certain amount of blood. They bled George Washington to death.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah. Yeah.
used, chemicals like calomel, which is mercury, arsenic, strychnine-based medications. Well, okay, those are toxic heavy metals. They thought, well, if we give you a little bit of that, it'll be great. So,
It's amazing to me. This has always been something that has sparked my I'm not sure, it's not curiosity, but uh, the Western medical system, and I'm not going to spend the whole show beating up the Western medical system,
well, we can if you want.
although I could, yes, but they love to forget where they came from.
Yeah, yeah.
Because anything that is even remotely experimental, okay, in their view, okay. So just throwing out something. I mean, there any kind of a new supplement, methylene blue or silver or any of these kinds of things that are kind of controversial, and they'll start talking about them like they're crazy and that people are quacks, etc. And they forget that they were, like you said, leaching blood out of people, or frontal lobotomies in the
Oh, sure.
psychological profession. So they forget all this stuff about where they came from, and it yeah.
Well, there was the accepted medical practice at the time. And then you'll have doctors 20 years later writing about, wow, we did really crazy stuff back 20 years ago. Good thing we're not doing that now. But they had other crazy ideas. A big crazy idea was hot regimen. They decided, well, if you're going to sweat out an illness, we're going to put you in a hot room, cover you with blankets, and don't give you any water. No
Right.
fresh air, no fresh water. We'll give you a little calomel just to kind of, give you something to put down your throat, I guess. And then people would die from that. You weren't dying from the disease, you were dying from the treatment, but it didn't, you know, they believed their treatments were great,
Right.
and they just kind of ignored that people were dying from them, right? So they
Did you
just,
ever read the book Murder by Injection?
yeah, that's one of the ones I read. Yeah, sure.
Crazy, crazy stuff there. That is kind of to the medical history, like dissolving illusions was for vaccines, just talking about the whole
Sure.
medical industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Skip. I want to come back to all that, but I want to come back to the beginning just for a second and find out how you met Dr. Humphreys. How did you guys get connected to end up making this project?
I was on a dating app. No, I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, so I'm listening to Gary Null. So I'm starting to write this book. I have all this data. I have all these charts, like hundreds of charts. Only some of them made it into the book, but so I have all these charts, and I start writing these little proto chapters, like mostly to just so I understand and I can kind of coalesce my thoughts around everything, right? What changed, what happened. And so I'm writing this and I'm listening to Gary Null. I almost listened to him like every day, pretty much. Anyway, I knew I needed a co-author if I was going to make this into a book that is a doctor, because then that will lend some kind of credibility to it.
Sure.
And I was just, yeah, somehow I knew that would happen, which I'm not like I wasn't a spiritual kind of person back then, but I was like, oh, I know somebody's going to come along. So I'm listening to his program one day, and there's this crazy lady talking about smallpox, and polio. And I was like listening. Oh, I found my co-author. I just knew it was her. And then I ended up calling her, got her answering machine, and she's like, ignored. And a third call that I left a message, she returned my call. And she said, "Oh, who are you?" I said, I'm working on this book, and I thought you might be interested." And she said, "Oh, I thought you were a quackbuster, giving me a hard time." I said, "Nope." And she lived up in Maine at the time, and I was in Connecticut. So she said, "Why don't you come up?" So me and my wife took a ride up there, and we met. Very nice lady. I mean, she's extraordinarily nice and, well, brilliant too. But she's a very nice lady. I showed her my little binder of proto chapters, and we went to some pond, and me and my wife just kind of hung out and took in the sunshine, and she started reading through it. And at the end, she's like, "Okay, let's do it." That's how it all began. And we worked on it for about 4 years,
It's a long
so
time.
yeah. I can't, I actually don't believe I actually spent all that time on it because I was still working. I was working as an engineer.
Yeah.
And so somehow I finished my job, and then I worked more on that, and then work on the weekends. And I don't know actually
What did your wife
how
think
I
about
did it.
all this?
She was very supportive.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing because I mean, as it should be, right? But
Well, yeah.
you're breaking norms here and you're going against the grain. And
Yeah. Well,
at that point, you may not have even noticed what was going to happen
right.
as far as feedback goes.
Well, I didn't even think about that. But when we met, she's passed since. But when we met down in, I forget how we met, somewhere in Yahoo chat or something. And she invited me down to come to some vaccine lecture by, I can't remember who it was, at a local library. It wasn't a big thing. And, she brought her little binder, and I brought my big 3 binders of stuff. She's like, "Wow, you're really into this." So she was already interested in this topic.
Gotcha.
So she was very supportive of all that. She would go with me to the libraries, with me to Yale Medical. I spent more time in Yale Medical than probably any doctor ever has. I was always in the basement looking through literature and stuff. Like, it's like, a little crazy. Most guys, watch sporting events, and I'm in the Yale Medical Library archives. So it's not exactly typical.
Well, that's an amazing connection story for you and your wife. That's pretty amazing. So when you started this process, like you said, you weren't thinking about any kind of negative feedback type of thing
Not at
because
all.
and at that point you probably wouldn't have seen it anyway because it wasn't
Yeah. Well, I didn't even know it was like a taboo subject.
right.
I just It was like following the data and following all the information and putting together a book. And because I felt like I should, since I had all this data that no one seemed to have. So I thought, well, this is probably a good thing. Let me put it onto the world and see what happens. And I never really thought about like being hammered or anything. I was like,
So
well,
did you get hammered?
not as much as Suzanne. Suzanne got
Sure.
death threats, and because she's the doctor, I'm just a dumb engineer. So I would get my insults once in a while, but nothing too severe. Baby killer or things of that nature. Fun
Right, right,
things.
right.
I'm like, okay, dude, whatever.
Read the
Never
book.
never really bothered me. I mean, it's like, okay, that's what you think. I don't care. Um, so yeah, I didn't really think there was going to be blowback. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal either.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm an engineer by training, I'm very anal about making sure it's all correct. So it's not, I didn't just write stuff. That's why I insisted on having quotes everywhere so that people could just read exactly what the quote said instead of me paraphrasing everything. So a lot of the book is quotes and charts, and I don't know how much we actually wrote, maybe a couple hundred pages. The rest of it's just like quotes and charts.
Well,
And
I love the book. I'm not saying it's an easy read. It is a read that
I
you
think the
have
first
to.
half is easy. I mean, it's basically like the, sanitation and,
Right, right.
all that kind of stuff. And yeah, when you get to the more sciencey things like polio and a lot of the stuff in whooping cough, especially now it's even more complicated, and measles. So yeah, that stuff is a little bit more complicated
Yeah.
for sure. And it's like, first, because Suzanne wrote most of polio. The first time I read it, I was like, I don't get it. There's too much stuff in here. It took me a while to like assimilate everything she wrote in there because she wrote most of it. That was like her passion, polio.
Yeah, she's talked a lot on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I,
That was her thing.
I did a lot of years doing seminars and talks for a variety of different audiences, and it would there was always almost every single time there was always at least one person who would always go, but what about polio?
Yeah, yeah,
That was
yeah.
always the big thing. What about polio? You weren't alive back then, so you don't know what it was like. That type of thing. And so
Sure.
this book was fantastic ammunition, because it was the first time it was all
Yeah,
compiled together.
yeah. So when I started this, and I wasn't there to write a book against vaccination. I was just trying to get all the facts I could and be as objective as I could. So all the data is the data, the quotes are the quotes, and we draw conclusions from all that information, but it's not, they're not crazy conclusions. They make sense. So we spent a long time making sure it all makes sense. It's not supposed to be like, oh, I hate vaccines. Let's write about I hate vaccines. I was pro-vaccine when I started. I thought vaccines probably saved everybody. I kind of pictured that scientists invented this somewhere along the line. I didn't know anything about it, but we got these injections now. We don't have plagues. Great. This was great. Suzanne was pro-vaccine or at least agnostic about it. She's like, well, yeah, this is fine. Most people I know thought it was great until they went to look. And when they looked, it's like, wait a second, just like me, I was like, wait, something doesn't seem to, make sense. So, it wasn't meant to be like an anti-vaxxer, which is kind of the, modern way to say anti-vaccinationist. I guess it's supposed to be more
That,
hip or something.
that's the word they want to use just to
Yeah, it's name
pigeonhole you into a bad
right.
position.
It's
Yeah,
name calling. It's like calling
it
you a
is.
poopy head or a moron or, whatever. It's childish behavior. It's like, okay, all right, I'm a poopy head. What don't you agree with in the book? Is the data make sense to you or it doesn't make sense to you? It's
Yeah.
not a rational discussion.
Well, see, that's exactly it. There's no rational discussion. They can't debate you on the facts because they lose. So they
Yeah.
can't do that. This conversation, I've been looking forward to it for quite a while. I don't know. I don't know if you probably don't remember that I emailed you like 2 years ago.
I
And
don't remember what I did yesterday.
yeah, I actually emailed you like two or 3 years ago to ask your permission to use one of your graphs
I
in a
probably
book
said
in a book
yes.
that I was writing. Oh, you
Yeah.
definitely said yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
All the data is on the website or in my Substack,
yeah,
and it's all free. It's public data. I just put it into charts, so you
yeah.
can do whatever you want with it.
Well, I appreciated you responded immediately, and you were like, yeah, absolutely, anything you want. Uh, and I kept the email and saved it, um, just in case later you said, I never told him he could use that.
Well, you eventually
Should have
put it
said
on the
he used
website that everything's free for use.
well, and
Because I kept on getting asked, I said, well, let's put it on the website so everybody knows they can just use it.
and you would think that that's so. What I was going to say about the appropriateness was that just here recently, and it was amazing to watch. Secretary Kennedy has been doing his weekly broadcasts where he basically gets in front of the camera and says, "This is what's happening right now," right? And he shares his transparency about what's going on. And the most recent one, he went on for almost 8 minutes about the history of vaccines. And
Yeah.
I think he even
Oh,
showed
did he?
one of the graphs from the book. I
Really?
think, yeah, I think pretty sure.
Uh,
But what brought it up was he was in a finance meeting and was called to task by Senator Cantwell with her own charts trying to show how vaccines saved everybody. Okay,
right, right,
saved the
right,
world. And so he did this 8 minute post of shooting, just totally destroying everything she said. And it
right, right,
was
right.
it was the most amazing thing to watch because when have we ever seen something like that be broadcast out to millions and millions of people? So here is our chance. Here we're not going to reach millions maybe, but I hopefully we can reach a lot of people with this
Sure.
information. So I would love for you to take us through a little bit of a journey, show us some of your graphs, and
Yeah,
and
sure.
and tell the audience who hasn't read Dissolving Illusions, um, the facts.
Yeah, we'll do, oops. We'll do a share since I figure out how to do it.
I may have
Um,
to open that up here.
Documents, advanced. That's not right. I think it's share window, isn't it? Do. Oh, there we
Yeah,
go.
I just opened it up from multiple audiences.
Yep. Oh, there we go. Couldn't find
There
it.
we go. Excellent.
Let's see. Just put you in the middle. Okay. Oh, there you are. You're over there. Got confused. All right. So how's that look?
That looks great.
All right. So there's some contact information. So you can find me on Substack, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Um, so what we're talking, this is how I got interested is the data, right? So we're going to go over some data and some quotes from medical journals. So this is the chart I created first. Actually, it's just I started with the green line, but this is the data from the US Vital Statistics from 1900 to whatever it is, 1965. And you can see here that the death rate had basically been, plunged by 90% for all these diseases before there was penicillin and other antibiotics. The whooping cough vaccine came in the late 1940s, and measles came in 1963. And scarlet fever, there was no vaccine for scarlet fever. So you can see that the vaccines couldn't have been, the key here at all because things were down 90 to 98% for the ones we had vaccines for. And in the case of scarlet fever, it went to zero, and no one even remembers scarlet fever, right?
Yeah, and one interesting note too is that, well, like where you say whooping cough came in late 40s, measles vaccine 1963, but even when they first came out, they weren't widely disseminated to every person in the country. It was very difficult to get every single
Right,
person. So they may have been on the market in 1963 for measles vaccine, but
right.
it wasn't probably until the 70s that the vast majority of people were getting vaccinated heavily.
Yes. So in 1967, they said they were going to vaccinate the right 2 to 4 million children, whatever that meant. So they were just going to vaccinate children at that point. And their idea was by the end of 1967, measles would be a thing of the past. Well, that didn't work out too well. But they had these ideas. They also would claim that it's lifelong immunity, one shot protects you for life, which is kind of like the standard thing they always do. And then it ends up not being true.
Yeah,
Um, you know, that type of thing. But so,
still doing
yeah,
the
you're
COVID.
right.
Yeah,
There's no way to know the coverage rate because that data is not kept. It wasn't kept, right? Nobody
right.
knows. So, yeah, sure. They could have had the vaccine in 1963. They had to actually ditch that vaccine because it was very problematic, called aseptic. No, that's not right. A particular type of reaction, which was worse than regular measles, atypical measles. There you go. And so they had to reformulate that and they had to relaunch it in 1967. So, the first vaccine was more or less a disaster, but they still say, well, we had it in 1963, therefore it's
Right.
great. Right.
Yep.
And here's the data I was talking about from England and Wales. They started in 1838. And you can see in the 1800s, wow, scarlet fever was a biggest killer of them all. It was called the Fell Destroyer. And everybody knew somebody who died from scarlet fever. It was everywhere. Everybody was dying from scarlet fever. Here you see measles, bigger kind of killer, less than scarlet fever, and whooping cough kind of in the middle. And then we see smallpox at the bottom, kind of just less of a killer, much less of a killer than scarlet fever, but you never hear about scarlet fever. And so you have the, antibiotics, 1944, mass production of penicillin, and DTB vaccine in England, 1957, down already by about 100%, 99.9 something percent. Same thing with measles, down by 99.9 something percent, almost 100%. So the vaccines came in way later from when people were dying like crazy. Here's data from Massachusetts, same kind of thing. We see deaths earlier in the 1800s. And the big killer in Massachusetts was tuberculosis.
Sure.
And that also went down by about 95% or so before they came out with streptomycin and the BCG vaccine. And, despite being the big killer, you can kind of see the trend line is going down and it didn't really affect anything. And again, we don't know how widespread it was. My understanding is the BCG vaccine was, pretty ineffective. So what impact did the, streptomycin have? Not I mean, we were already down by 98% or so in mortality. You can see the curve was still basically unaffected, the trend line. So all these things came in, and these various data sets came in way later. And you can see in measles, 1963, the death rate in, Massachusetts was basically zero. People weren't dying of measles, but we had to vaccinate like everybody on the planet for
Yeah, it's
it.
like they were everything they were doing was focused on what they remembered from, 50
Well,
years
yeah,
ago.
I think that's what happened. I think there was a societal memory of these deadly diseases, and we're going to do whatever we can to stop them, which is not the right, paradigm, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I
Here's
agree.
the data set that created this chart. So anybody can go get this data set. It's online, and you can punch in the same numbers, and you'll get the same chart. But that way, you can verify the data.
I actually did some of that looking through these charts, and much respect to you. That was tedious. That
Yeah,
was
well, it's
really
not too much
tedious.
fun cutting, typing each data point into a spreadsheet.
Yeah, not at
I
all.
don't know why I did it. I'm a little crazy, I guess.
Well, you have that engineer's brain.
Yeah.
I've known many, many, many engineers, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
engineers all have that a brain that uh, likes that. I don't know if likes data is the correct way, but
No,
kind of
not really.
gravitates towards data and wants to
Well,
figure
data,
things out.
you know, we're supposed to be a data-driven society, but nobody looks at this data.
Yeah.
You know, that makes
Well,
no
we tend to
sense.
trust the person who says that they did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so here's the chart. The first chart I made is the green one. That's the one I just said, huh, well, that's crazy. But this same chart existed in the 1960s. This is from a US Vital Statistics. So they knew these, they had these charts, they knew the data. And if you actually go to this document, you'll see all the diseases collapsing before there was any kind of medical interventions.
Hmm. Right in front of you.
Yeah, and this is from a particular book. Same thing. They show like 98% decline in mortality rate. Most of the whooping cough deaths happened before 1950s. And actually, they talk about that. So 97% of the deaths decreased from 1901 to 1945 before there was any kind of vaccine. So anytime anybody says, well, vaccines saved us from all these deaths, well, untrue. And here's a quote from British Medical Journal. And in this, they're talking about over 10 years at this particular practice. Kids would have, excuse me, measles, but they found that it wasn't very serious, so it wasn't that big of a deal. So even in young infants, the disease has not been found to be especially serious. So everybody made recoveries over 10 years for measles. So it wasn't this big, horrible panic that we needed to vaccinate for.
Well,
Uh,
and the proof of that is even now. If you look now, I was just having this conversation earlier this year with somebody. If you look at measles is cyclical. As many of these viruses are, they have their peaks and their valleys as far as I think measles is every 4 or 5 years when it rises up and then it comes back down again. And if you look at the measles cases in the United States and in Europe and in Canada, in all those places, you're going to see it rise almost at the exact same time periods and go down right after that.
right.
And during those time periods, there's hardly any deaths whatsoever. 2019 was the last really big measles epidemic here in the United States, and it was like something like 1,240 cases of measles, something like that. And I think there was one death, maybe two
Yeah,
at the most.
the thing is with this ideology of looking at these charts, right? This chart makes everybody think, and I used to think that this is all about some microbe. The microbe comes along and you end up dead, right? But it actually doesn't hold any water, because if that was true, we would get that big flat line and then the vaccine came in and would drop. What you see here is that's not true. So any kind of microbe that's involved is not really that important. What's important is what we discovered is the health of the person.
Host, yeah,
Right. So if you're healthy, it's not a big deal.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
rarely a problem.
It's
And
host
also,
resistance. That's
it's
the big thing.
right. It's not only your health, but what medical interventions are they performing? And in the case of, during the 1800s, it was, mercury and arsenic and bleeding and hot regimen. Well, if you're doing those things, you might not be dying from that. You might be dying from the environment you're in, your poor nutrition, and the medical procedures but things get labeled as, well, you had measles. That's why you died. And we're still stuck with this thinking, which I
It's
think,
evidence in COVID. I mean, the exact same thing was happening in COVID. You went to
yeah.
the hospital
And
for
then
X, Y,
there's,
Z.
right, there's the other factor is fear. You get people afraid. There was a guy, Dr. Henry Littlejohn, 1880s, who wrote as his experience as a sanitary engineer for hospitals for 25 years. And he said, well, as a sanitary engineer, you can't be afraid. If you do, you will manifest the diseases that you're afraid of. And as a sanitary engineer, he had a whole team that for that period of time never got measles, whooping cough, scarlet fever, any of these diseases, tuberculosis, even though they were in there all the time, and they never transmitted it to their families.
Hmm.
I thought that was really pretty profound.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's the fear um, aspect of things, which we don't think about. Again, we always think about here's a microbe. That's the only thing that matters. And we still couch it like that. You can listen to any news program. Well, they caught it and that's why they're dead. But what about the health of the person? What procedures did you perform on them? Were they terrified? And you can certainly say during COVID, everyone was terrified. Well, not me, because I didn't care. But everybody was like terrified. And you could see it like, terror. I saw people on the street, I'd go for a walk and they're like screaming at me, "Where's your mask?" I'm on the beach, dude. Relax. They were freaked out. They were ready to have a heart attack. Well, you can't be healthy if you're terrified 24/7. So that's another factor that we, you know, um, don't pay attention to.
Well, there's a mathematical equation. Yeah, you've probably seen this in all of the things that you've done that I was exposed to back in chiropractic college in the 90s. And it's virulence times the number of organisms times the portal of entry over host resistance equals disease. And so when you look at that, once again, the denominator is host resistance. And the denominator is what controls the entire equation. is that denominator.
Yeah, I would also add into that equation medical treatments,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
like,
Sure.
so Dr. Klenner was treating
Interventions.
measles or polio with vitamin C. Then he had like tremendous results,
Right.
100% success in 60 cases of polio.
Right.
Well, how come we didn't do that, right? If we did that and we didn't do these other things, well, maybe that would have been better. So we don't take all these different factors into account. We always boil it down to microbe equals disease.
Yep. Exactly.
And I think that's, a major failing in how we look at these things.
100%. Yeah. 100%. I completely agree.
We did that one. 1960, this particular author is like, oh, well, why are we vaccinating everybody? Because pertussis, which is whooping cough, is very mild and has a very small mortality. By the time they came out in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't that big of a deal. And when I was growing up, I've heard of whooping cough. I thought when you got it, you would just basically cough and cough and cough and cough to death. But that wasn't true by the middle of the 1900s. But they were still thinking that way. And they did this with smallpox too, even though smallpox became a mild disease. They were always thinking, well, worst case scenario, right? Oh, they're going to cough to death. And that wasn't happening anymore.
Not only do the viruses change, but also people's immune systems and the conditions in the environment. So they're
In the
not
case, right, in the case
calculating
of
that.
whooping cough, we're talking about a bacteria, right? Bordetella
Yeah.
pertussis.
And we know that most of the outbreaks, especially now, happen in the larger vaccinated populations. So
Well, yeah,
vaccination is not even helping.
well, it actually makes things worse. We'll get to
Yeah.
that in a second. But yeah, here's another quote saying vaccination played no major role in incidence and mortality decline in England. But this type of stuff is just basically shelved and ignored. Um, so, here's again, whooping cough, measles are no longer important causes of death or severe illness, except in a minority of infants who are otherwise disadvantaged. Well, that probably means they're nutritionally,
Immune. Yeah.
you know, nutritionally damaged.
Yeah.
That most children,
Immunosuppressed.
yeah, most children overcome easily without being vaccinated. And again, at the bottom of these slides, most of them have where I got this information from. So you can go to this journal, get the right volume, page number, and everything, and you'll find this. It's not made up
Yeah.
because it sounds like I made it up, but it's not.
Absolutely. I mean, the average person, thank God this has changed. Okay. And it's changing rapidly. More and more people are becoming awake to the idea that what they thought was reality with vaccinations
Sure.
is not what they thought.
Well, this is exactly what I went through. 500 years ago, 25 years ago. It was like it was a shock.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why I sat in the library and just looked like that can't be true. So I get it when people go, that can't be true, because that was me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even after I put the data in the spreadsheet and made my first green chart, it was like, that can't be true, because it's such a societally embedded idea. And I have no idea where it came from because I don't remember being taught that in, grammar school or high school or anything. I just knew. Where did I know it from? I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
kind of just permeated
it's
the
it's
culture.
almost like a societal consciousness.
Yeah.
So
I started doing my investigating into vaccination probably around the same time you did in the 90s. I did a fellowship in pediatrics, and
wow.
in that, I was introduced to questioning vaccines. They weren't trying to teach us not to believe in vaccines, but they were just wanting us to look into it and question it. And
Yeah.
as I opened that door, like you did, you open the door and you go, "Whoa, what is this?
Yeah, what's this?
What the hell is that?" Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and that just led to the same kind of thing. Years and years of looking at this stuff and going, "Okay, we're being lied to constantly. We're being lied to." Yeah.
Yeah, I think people, and this was true for smallpox, people obtain this kind of idea because they were taught it and they just assume it's correct. And so they just go with it.
Yeah.
And then once you believe something and somebody goes, well, that's not true, you're like, yeah, who are you? Of course it's true. That's what I was taught.
Yeah.
It's hard to overcome that.
There's a I put this in the book. I've written a book, but it's not published yet. I'm still
Oh,
looking to
okay.
get a publisher to do this. I've
You
got
can do
two.
you can do self-publishing, by the way. That's
Yeah,
pretty good.
that is one way to do it, and I know that's the way you guys did it with this. And I may have to end up going that route. I'm still holding out for
Well,
the
if you
hope for
want to do
that.
that, we'll make a call and I'll help you out. Get that
Well,
done.
we'll talk. We'll talk for sure.
Yeah,
And in one of my chapters, it's that whole it's the victors who create history, that
sure.
write the history. And so you think about things like George Washington's wooden teeth. Not true. Uh, you know, uh,
Yeah, they were
uh,
plastic.
well, the British are coming. The British are coming. Not true.
Right.
Didn't happen.
Right.
All these things that we think about as this is part of history, and we learn
Sure.
it in school, etc. And they're just not true statements at all.
Yeah,
Uh,
like Jenner came up and it was like, oh, I think cowpox protects people from smallpox, and he scratched it onto a young man, and oh, okay, everything's done. Everything was solved by that. That's not even true.
yeah, I know.
Well, it's sort of true, partially true, but it's
There,
not really
there's
true.
truth in it, but not
Right.
the whole story is not
He
true.
thought it was
So
he thought it was from a horse,
yeah.
actually. It gets really weird. Yeah.
Well, vodka for vaccines,
Right,
vodka
right.
is
It's cow.
cow. Exactly.
Yeah, the
So,
original one was called cowpoxing,
right.
but he actually thought it came from a horse. Other
Well,
people,
that was
yeah,
something too, because we if you talk to, the pro-vaxxers, if you want to do it that way, they'll talk about, oh, vaccination's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. But that's not quite true, because what they were doing with taking pus from one animal and putting in that is not vaccination in the classic sense that we're talking about now. They don't have the adjuvants and all the other crap in this
no.
formulation that they're injecting into your
Well, they
body.
didn't, but you were taking pus from an animal, or oftentimes it's actually from another person, because
Right.
arm-to-arm vaccination for 100 years.
Yeah.
So all the fungus and bacteria and all that was in that, and then you would just put it into your arm. Well, that's not going to end well. But
Well,
they didn't even know they were doing that when they were doing
it's
it.
just a totally different process, though. I mean, what we're doing
Yeah.
now with modern vaccination has no resemblance to what they were doing, 200 years ago with,
Sure, they're all
that
different.
was almost like, here, I sucked on a sucker and I've got chicken pox. Now you suck on the sucker, you're going to get chicken pox. Okay, well, whatever. That's just transferring
Yeah.
sickness. And then you have natural immunity after that. But what they're doing now with vaccination is not even remotely
Well,
the
what they
same thing.
did was not, all it was doing is putting stuff into your bloodstream. Depending
Yeah,
on how deep they cut with the lancet, they would cut your arm like 4 or 5 times, and they would smear the stuff in. So
yeah,
depending on how deep it went in, you don't know what would happen. You would get really, really. You were supposed to get sick by the way when you got vaccinated,
yeah.
and that was supposed to make you healthier for later encountering smallpox. But of course, the source of it was either from a cow or from a horse, but mostly it's from another person. Or sometimes it was from somebody who died from a smallpox that they scratched onto a cow. It was a whole mishmash of different ideas. And, so when you got this stuff, you were going to not end, it's not going to end well. You might
Right.
survive, you might think you're protected, and a lot of times it didn't help you anyway. Happened all the time. So it was
That which
basically
doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
it was a failed experiment from the beginning.
Yeah.
But once it took hold, you couldn't get rid of it. It took hold by the year 1800. It became such a fad. So people were just doing it and no one wanted to go back on it. Even when in 1805, a guy wrote a book on how it wasn't working. 1810, another guy. So there's a lot of people that pointed out it wasn't working and it was dangerous. But didn't matter because it was already a thing and they couldn't get rid of it. And then
That's one of the
eventually
things I love in your book too, is the pictures that you put in there of uh, protests and the anti-vaxxers from the 1800s, right? These
yeah.
pictures of people saying we will not vaccinate.
Well, that started in 1800.
Yeah,
People are like, wait a second, this is a dumb idea. But they were always overruled by the majority of medical men who
yeah,
decided this was a great idea. And they were building on a previous thing called inoculation, which
exactly.
was right. So that was just taking smallpox from somebody and then scratching it onto you. So this was basically just a variation of the same thing. And they had been doing that for 80 years with no success really. And so like, well, let's switch it up. Oh, now it's a new fad. Let's do that. So and they believed it worked because they kind of like confused themselves or tricked themselves into thinking it actually worked. the way they tested things, as Dr. Crichton kind of pointed out in his books. But it stuck. You couldn't get rid of it. Anybody that went against it had a hard time. And then it became codified into law. So in England, you had to get your child vaccinated by 3 months of age. Otherwise, you would face, fines and jail time. So compulsory vaccination was around for a long time
Yeah.
based on this kind of idea.
Yep.
And anybody went against it, they had a hard time.
Still.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it kind of faded away by the mid 1900s, and compulsory vaccination was finally gotten rid of in 1948, even though a lot of people weren't getting the smallpox vaccine. The rate of vaccination was dropping since the Leicester event in 1885, and even before that. So that by the time you got into the early 1900s, probably 2/3 of the people weren't getting the vaccine anymore because no, it was people knew people who died from it or got sick from it, so they stopped doing it. And people would get the vaccine multiple times, and then they would end up with smallpox. And like, whoa, so people understood that over time that this was happening, so they just said, no, I don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
And so in 1885, there was a big demonstration, 100,000 people or so protested, and they eventually kicked out that government. And they installed a new government that said, no, we're not going to prosecute people for not vaccinating. We're not going to push it. And the vaccination rate continued to drop. And the medical men of the time said, well, you're all going to die because you're not taking Jenner's wonderful gift. Edward Jenner was the inventor. So, and that never happened. And Leicester didn't ever have a high vaccination rate. And for 62 years, they did just fine. So, so they were right. The medical men were wrong. But we're still left with the mythology that, oh, well, the vaccine actually took care of it.
Just another example of, once again, the victors writing the history.
Yep. Just to continue. So this was an important study, 500 consecutive cases of whooping cough, British Medical Journal, 1995. Most cases of whooping cough are relatively mild. Doctors are unlikely to hear the characteristic cough. Parents can be reassured that a serious outcome is unlikely. That should be enough to say, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Why are we doing this? And sometimes you would find stuff like this in medical journal pediatrics. 90% of the decline of infectious disease happened before 1940, before antibiotics, before vaccines. So you already had 90%, but no one seemed to think that was important. To date a guy like me, well, I think that's pretty important. You would think, why don't we just do more of the stuff that got us to 90%, right?
Exactly.
So this doctor, McCormick, 1951, he noticed this, all these trends of these various diseases. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but basically he determined it couldn't be our medical interventions. It must be some other unknown factor that is the reason all these are declining at the same rate. So it wasn't our medical interventions. It's something else, which we determined was what we just talked about a little while ago, about the environment people lived in, their nutritional status, the medical procedures, and all that type of stuff.
All the different things that were creating host resistance problems.
Yeah. And so this is a pretty big study we wrote about in the book, 1977, and the authors basically said, well, the total, the mortality decline, maybe 3.5% is attributed to medical measures, maybe 3.5%, which is not the majority at all. So most of it had to do with something else, right? And this is the chart they had in the book.
For this.
Yeah. So this is from their 1977 paper. And interesting, you can see the dotted line is the percent of GDP going to medical care. And so in the 30s it was like 5%, and it just keeps on going up and up, and it's shooting up to 8.5% by 1970. Now it's almost 20%. We spend more and more money on so-called health care instead of keeping people healthy, real health, not medical interventions. So eating properly, exercise, sunshine, all that type of stuff. Instead we
Maha. Now we got Maha, right? So
Well, yeah, I don't hold up too much long-term hope from that, but maybe a few
So,
good things will
so
happen.
let's touch upon that for a second. So, what is it do you feel that the uh, pharmaceutical industrial complex, as opposed to the war complex, we have the pharmaceutical complex, that it's just too big and too powerful to uh,
Well,
change in any
I call
dramatic
it,
sense?
yeah, it's a sickness industrial complex because you have
Yes, absolutely.
big agriculture that grows food that doesn't have the proper nutrients like magnesium, that type of thing. So you're starting off at a deficit. Even in the 1920s, there was a paper written and submitted to Congress that the soil of today, 1920s, is nothing like it used to be. It's already degraded, and here we are. It's vastly more degraded, right?
Yeah,
So none of the trace minerals and all that, it's like you might get in like an organic soil, real soil. And then they go to the big food industries who make Doritos and Dunkin' Donuts and Coca-Cola. And I grew up on this stuff, but it wasn't a major part of my life because I grew up in the 70s, right? And but this is what people eat like all the time. It's a disaster. And obesity is shooting up
agreed.
through the roof. People are magnesium deficient, they're iodine deficient, they're vitamin D deficient because they're not in the sunshine. So you have that giant mess. And then we have the medical industry that comes in and says, "Well, we'll help you with this, with all the different drugs," and instead of working on the base level, right? What's
Yeah,
what's what's wrong? What are you doing lifestyle wrong? Because they make money and people like to hear an easy answer. Here's a pill, take that. Your cholesterol's high, take that. You have obesity, take Ozempic. No problem, just do that. And people are satisfied with that because they don't have to do the hard work in trying to figure out how to get healthy, which is actually not that hard, but people
a-
perceive it to be hard.
absolutely.
And so it's a big giant system that feeds on itself. Most people, it's most of our economy. It's a huge part. And so it's a big disaster, but nobody wants to address the real underlying causes. And even if they do, somebody in office is only there for 4 years and then they're out. And the next guy comes in and goes, "No, I want to go back to the way it was."
Yeah, well,
So unless you
exactly.
change the people's perceptions and that they want to get healthy, real healthy, not like, "Oh, I had a salad at McDonald's." I mean, really try to get healthy, work out, eat right, drink, don't drink all this stuff, et cetera, et cetera. You're not going to change the fundamental aspects of society. So this is kind of like, little window dressing, especially like food coloring. Okay, all right, that's good, but it's still, you take it out of, some cereal. The cereal's still garbage. It's
Absolutely.
mostly sugar anyway. So you took out the food coloring. It's still going to make you fat. Maybe,
I think the food coloring thing was the low hanging fruit, and they were just trying to get momentum. Is what I think.
yeah, maybe.
I'm still trying to be very positive about it myself, because
Yeah. But
I know that Kennedy's heart
food
is
industries can reverse all that. But
absolutely. And
it's
so
like,
my hope is that, I mean, because right now we're 8 months, 9 months into this process, in a 4 year process. So we're barely scratching the surface right now, and we still got another, 3.5 years or whatever to try to make change. And we got the right person in the right job. Kennedy is the right
yeah,
person
I
for
think
that.
I think I think the key is to empower people to realize don't listen to the government, don't listen to industries and get healthy.
100%.
So if you do that, then you're going to be doing great. If you just kind of follow along and just do, if you it's still the same in grocery stores. You go to a grocery store, the middle's filled with junk no one should ever eat. Or
Agreed.
you should eat it once a year at a party, birthday party. Besides that, no. And you look at people's grocery carts, they're just filled with garbage.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are obese. A lot of people are pale. They can barely walk. This is like a disaster. It should be treated as a disaster. And
The very first episode that I did of the Flipside, the very first one, and I purposely did the first one this way, was all about philosophy and health and
yeah,
switching paradigms, changing paradigms. And that's exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about the only way we can change this in any real meaningful way is for the populace to have a paradigm
Yeah.
shift that puts them in healthcare, not sick care.
Yeah. And the issue is people are making a lot of money to keep it the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to advertise. I don't watch TV, but not that long ago I saw some advertisements. But they're going to advertise breakfast cereals and all sorts of garbage and spin it that's healthy maybe, but
Mm-hmm.
basically it's fun. It's got a lot of colors and it's got Dora the Explorer on the cover of the box, so it's great. So
We're
and
using
kids,
beet juice now instead of
well,
this, and
yeah,
it's
they might
healthy.
shift it around a little bit, but it's still garbage. It's
Of
not
course.
real food. And Coca-Cola, there's a whole aisle of Coca-Cola and sodas. It's like, and people are buying that. This is just a giant sugar hit. So what's going to happen? People are going to end up sick, down the road. You might be okay in your 20s, and then by the time you hit 30, oh, well, things aren't working so well anymore. Then you go to your doctor who's not really interested because they're not incentivized to go, maybe you should not drink Coca-Cola. What? Are you crazy? So the whole system is very much intertwined with our entire society. And so you have advertisers and everyone's making crap loads of money. So, they're going to do whatever they can to keep that cash flowing. So
I
they'll
agree with
say,
that.
well, you know what? We'll take out those colors. It'll take us 4 years. And by the time that comes around, you'll be gone. So who cares?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of games being played.
Agreed.
So the key is to, I think, basically say to the people, say, hey, you're in charge of your health. You need to do these things. List them out. That's what you really need to do. Ignore advertisers, ignore the government, ignore all that stuff, and go and get yourself healthy. You don't need anybody to do that.
At the very least, I hope that, and I think this is one of the reasons why Kennedy is doing what he's doing with his transparency of getting in front of the camera as often as he can on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and putting those messages out there, because he has the audience right now. He has a captured audience he can talk to and start to educate. And so that's where it has to change. It has to change in the minds of the populace, because
Well,
it's going to be very difficult to change it on any other level.
yeah, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing has to implode before it gets better, but we'll see.
Well, there's an interesting thing that I was thinking about just now while you were talking about, because we're talking right now about all these things declining because of those improvements in nutrition and in sanitation and in living environments, et cetera. All these improvements, right? Now it's almost like there's a purposeful shift back to trying to make the host resistance poor. Okay, so we had all these things making host resistance better. Now we've got all the crap, like you talked about, in nutrition, all the things that people are eating, right? And
Hmm.
less exercise because of on-screen stuff and sitting at
Sure.
your desk, right? And also tons of medical interventions that are just toxifying the body. And so that's actually taking us backwards.
Sure. I think we have. I think we peaked in the 70s and starting around 80s, we're going backwards.
Yeah.
So if you look at pictures from the 50s, 60s, 70s, people look pretty okay. They might not be, big muscle people or anything like that, but they were relatively thin, they were relatively healthy. Now it's like, holy cow.
The percentage of
Yeah, it's
obesity.
right, and it's only escalating. I haven't looked at the latest stats, but all you have to do is walk to Walmart and take a look, or any of these stores, and people are, barely moving around.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
all their conveniences have made it even worse. It's like, oh, I drive up to the front of the store, the back of my car opens. I just basically have to stumble into the grocery store and fill my cart up and go back and watch TV all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we're essentially dooming ourselves. So I think eventually society is just going to implode on itself because people won't be able to do much. And then, everything's just at your fingertips. You can food, get 24/7. You can go out there and get that 24/7, anything you want, as much as you want. And people are more than happy to give it to you.
Yeah.
So, and there's no personal responsibility. There's no corporate responsibility. There's no governmental responsibility. Not really. And so, we're on not on a good course. So,
I would agree. A course change has to happen. I just hope, I am still optimistic um, about the changes that are happening now, whether or not what they're gonna look like at the end of the 4 years, and hopefully we get another 4 years with an administration that will keep this in play.
Yeah.
So let's say we do get 8 years. Okay. Maybe
Well, who knows?
JD Vance, becomes president and keeps Kennedy and all these people moving
Well,
in the right
yeah,
direction.
there's other factors besides just health that I think are gonna like cause us to be in deep shit, basically.
Well, yeah, you've got lots of things. Well, you've got we can touch upon this. I want to continue with this direction, but
Yeah, sure.
you've got another book that you are co-author with regarding environmental
Well,
issues.
yeah, there's the environment, that there's economy, there's this obsession with humans wanting, especially Westerners, wanting to keep wars going everywhere.
Right.
These are not good strategies, but they make big money. They get people power trips. And I don't think any of it's any use. It's not useful, and it's not the way humanity should be going. But I'm just a dude. What are you going to do? Shit.
Yeah.
So,
I think we do what we can do as individuals, and the larger picture hopefully will be affected by our actions. But
well, that's all you can do.
yeah, that is it.
Uh, it's interesting. By the early 1900s, there was a big health movement, and people were trying to like do things like exercise and eat right and all that kind of stuff. But it slowly just deteriorated over the decades to the point where we are now. And like I said, I don't watch TV anymore, but there used to be all sorts of ads for stupid drugs, all the time.
It's still there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I saw it. I went to take my car in, and I was watching whatever was on the TV. I wasn't really watching it, but I would look up, and it was on one of the Lifetime channels or some kind of channel like that. Holy cow, they hammer people with every darn drug there is,
Oh yeah.
and junk food.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how's anybody going to survive this? It's just like continuous.
Yeah.
So if you're, I think this was targeted for the elderly, clearly. And so it was like, if you're watching this like all the time, you think, well, that's what I should do. That's your little paradigm bubble. But it ends up being a disaster.
No argument on my end. No
So,
argument on my end.
so okay. Anyway, back to whatever I'm
Back to our
presenting.
regularly scheduled broadcast.
Yeah, yeah. So this is kind of interesting. So this shows total deaths. The other chart showed normalized to deaths per 100,000. So that way populations change. You can kind of just make more of a reasonable judgment on things, right? So it's not total deaths, it's deaths per 100,000. But this particular chart is total deaths. And you can see this is per pertussis, which is whooping cough, and the deaths had gone down to close to zero by 1957. In the 1970s, there was a scare about neurological damage from the DTP vaccine,
Yeah.
which caused vaccine levels to drop. And you can see the dotted blue line dropping. And then you see there's not any really increase in deaths because they were already near zero anyway. So despite a dip in vaccination rates, which people panicked at the time because they thought everyone was going to die, if they looked at their own data, they would know that's not true. But they got the vaccination rates back up, so now they're back at 95%. So wonderful.
Wonderful. Yes, exactly.
Same thing in Sweden. They determined that most children had 3 doses of vaccine. They found that they still had whooping cough, which they determined they have the particular bacteria. What doesn't mean they were all coughing to death. They just mean they had Bordetella pertussis detected. So they said the DTP vaccine was ineffective, and because of concerns over safety, they banned, they got rid of national vaccination in 1979 in the entire country of Sweden. And if we look at this chart, the vaccine came in 1953, and for 17 years, there was no national vaccination program for DTP, for pertussis. If we zoom in, over 17 years, there's no increase in mortality rate from whooping cough. Nothing happened. So here's a case. We don't have vaccination for 17 years. Oh, okay. no problem.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then what's interesting is because there was a debate about the DTB vaccine, that the pertussis part of it, the P part, was very problematic and it would cause the neurological damage. So they came up with this idea of DTaP, which is attenuated pertussis, which is supposed to be more less reactive, right? And so the problem is because of the way it's structured, it doesn't really prevent any kind of, it doesn't give you any kind of real immunity. And this is from Dr. Cherry in 2019. And he said all children who were primed by DTaP vaccines will be more susceptible to whooping cough throughout their lifetimes. And there's no easy way to decrease this increased lifetime susceptibility. Sorry. So he's recommending DTaP should be administered for 3 years for your entire life for anybody who got the DTaP. So what he's saying here is, well, this vaccine failed, but now you have to get it every 3 years. Now, at the bottom of this slide is the paper. I recommend everybody get that paper. You read it and then ask your doctor what goes on here, what's going on here. The DTaP has made me more susceptible, and I have to get a vaccine maybe every 3 years because why? Because you permanently changed my immune system. That's what linked epitope suppression is. It's called original antigenic sin. So you permanently changed my immune system to react poorly, and it doesn't even last. And now I'm supposed to get your vaccine every 3 years. Well, I'm a little upset by this. I would be, right? So
This is very similar throughout medicine. We'll give you a medication for your problem that has its own problems that lead to you needing to have another medication because of the problems you got from
right.
that medication.
Well, the thing with vaccines is they usually make a claim, oh, protect you for life and there's no downside. And,
Yeah.
Eventually you find out there's a downside. So they just said, well, you need more vaccines. It's like, really? They never admit, well, we made a mistake. Although this paper is called Mistakes Made and Implications for the Future. So at least it's admitted in the title. But generally, the government never says, well, we made a mistake on our recommendation. We're just going to add more vaccines throughout your life. So
One of
that,
my big one of the chapters in my book, I go over chickenpox vaccine and shingles. And I'm assuming you understand all that very well. The chickenpox, we wouldn't have the epidemic of shingles that we have now if we didn't have
yeah,
the chickenpox vaccine as long as we had. It's created a whole nother epidemic.
chickenpox, even in the 1800s, was considered a no big deal.
Yes.
And chickenpox wasn't a big deal, but the justification was, well, we'll have less lost days of work. Not that it was saving lives or anything,
Right.
but then it turned into an industry, and now everyone's supposed to get this dopey thing. For what reason? Because you might not get sick, but they don't really know that. The thing with all these things that they do, they assume they know enough to tamper with the human body, which they don't really understand. No one understands it. But they think, well, if we do this, if we give you a shot in the arm of DTaP, that'll be great. But they later on discover that there's a semi-separate immune system in your lungs that reacts locally, which a shot can't give you, which they didn't know. And so now you're caught in this state where, oh, well, it's not really working, but you should get more of them. So, they mess up things because they don't really no one really fully understands the whole thing. So, but they think they pretend they do. And then they just start doing things that might not work out. So it ends up being an entire experiment on the public.
It's an arrogance. It's an arrogance based on a mechanistic philosophical premise that they're trying to apply to a vitalistic system.
Right.
So we are a vitalistic system, and they're trying to apply mechanistic principles to a vitalistic system, and you're going to screw that up every time.
Yeah. And again, it's always about the microbe. They're not trying to improve the health of people. They're always like, oh, we got to protect you from the microbe, which the charts show is absurd. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be making sure the person is a healthy person, make sure you're not doing dumb medical things. But we don't do that. We do, stop the microbe at all costs.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
even if it
absolutely.
doesn't work, just do more of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If at first you don't succeed, keep doing it over and over.
Well, it works because people are, you get brainwashed into it. And I used to be
Yeah.
brainwashed into it. So it made sense to me. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know. They must know what they're doing. Um, Flu vaccine, they started in the, 70s for flu vaccination. It had already decreased by 90% by that point, but no one seemed to ask why, well, why did that happen? And then they started vaccinating. That's the dotted blue line. You can see the vaccination rates slowly go up. And the brown line is we're kind of zoomed in here at the bottom here, right? So,
Ah, gotcha.
so
Yeah.
we're kind of zoomed in over here. But we see the death rate actually go up for a little while and then go back down. So over 40 years, the death rate ended up being at the same point as when they started vaccinating. So nothing's really changed.
Hmm.
And everyone should go get this paper and then go ask whoever you want and you might be a little ticked off
Oh,
because
and look who's on the who helped with
Fauci is
the
the third
yeah.
author on it. I'm just going to read this because it's important. As of 2022, after more than 60 years of experience with influenza vaccine, very little improvement in vaccine prevention of infection has been noted. Wow. As pointed out decades ago and still true today, the rates of effectiveness of best approved influenza vaccines would be inadequate for licensure. Wow, again. Is it it is not surprising that none of the predominantly mucosal respiratory virus has ever been effectively controlled by vaccines. Vaccines against non-systemic mucosal respiratory viruses with high mortality rates have thus far eluded vaccine development efforts. Okay, then why do we tell people to get a flu vaccine every year? You know why? Because they can. And they keep on going, well, you know what? We're going to come up with a better idea, mRNA or whatever they're going to come up with. And this time, the next 60 years, I'm sure we'll get it right. You would think after 60 years of failure, you would go, well, I'm a little embarrassed, but we haven't really done this very well. Maybe you should maybe consider, I don't know, vitamin D. Maybe that would be better and safer. But no, because they're obsessed with this vaccine idea. So everyone should get this paper. Don't take my word for it, but this quote's from there.
Yeah.
And then go read it and go, wow, wow. Well, at least I go, wow. Maybe somebody else has a different interpretation, but
I,
I don't know.
I
After
would say
60
wow,
years,
but I also wish I wasn't, so non-pulsed by it because I'm so used
well, yeah, I'm
so
used to it
used to
now.
it. Yeah.
But the first time I read even this paper, I was like, wow, they're just admitting in their own papers that this is a disaster.
Yeah.
But they still go to Walmart or anywhere. Oh, get your flu vaccine.
For free.
Yeah, get as many as you want. Get 50. I don't care. Get as many as you want. They don't say that, but I'm just saying they don't, there's no, you go to a store, you don't have to even have a health exam. Go get these shots. Go ahead. And I know a person, my mother-in-law, uh, decided to go in and get some shots. She was not in a good state. And so she got like a whole bunch of shingles and a bunch of stuff. She ended up in the hospital after that. But no one cares because you can get it. You can get as many as you want. It's your free choice to go get it. You don't have to have any exam or anything. It's a kooky system.
That's one way
That
to put
this
it.
particular thing has become so like, well, it's just like drinking water. It's no big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then you find out, well, it doesn't even work. Great. Don't we stop this? This is something it could be possibly done by the government saying, hey, well, we admitted here that doesn't work, and the charts show it doesn't work, so we recommend you don't get your flu vaccine. But I don't think anybody
Right.
has the
Yeah.
cojones to do that.
You'd think that that would be the case, but
Well,
yeah.
logically, you would say, well, this is not the best approach. And then you would look at vitamin D studies that show, amazing results. So maybe most of this is a vitamin D deficiency. And then you throw in zinc or magnesium. People are magnesium deficient. And you're obese too. So that makes vitamin D less effective. So maybe we should take care of these things first. Nah, just give them a shot.
Yeah, vitamin D, a lot of I don't know if it was really until the pandemic that a lot of people didn't realize that vitamin D was so important for immune. I mean,
Yeah.
people who've looked at it and researched it, yes, but the lay people think, oh, vitamin D is for bone, it's for
Yeah,
calcium.
it's involved in 5% of biological functions. It's very critical. And again, if you're obese, you're going to have less effectiveness of that because it gets stored in your tissues. So it's not going to be utilized
Yeah,
properly. I said property, didn't I? Properly.
that's right.
And then, of course, if you're darker skinned, you're going to be less likely to absorb that, manufacture the vitamin D from the sun's rays. And you can't get it indoors. The glass filters it. You have to be outdoors. And less people are outdoors. And plus, they got scared by the industry saying, "Whoa, you're going to get cancer if you go out in the
You
sun."
can't
And I
in the
know
sun.
people who will not go out in the sun.
Yeah,
They are terrified of the sun.
I will. I have been doing functional medicine or health coaching for decades, and I can tell you from personal experience, looking at vitamin D blood test results with patients and clients, that I I could probably count on one hand in the hundreds and hundreds of these that I've looked at, on one hand, people who actually had a normal range for their vitamin D.
Depends on what you mean by normal, too. What,
Well, once again,
50
yeah,
nanograms?
no, 60 is what I consider
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. Optimal level is 50, 60, right?
Yeah.
But
So I
depending
look
on
at
which
50,
study
60.
you look at, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 20,
Oh, well,
sometimes 30, right?
most medical doctors and most medical doctors, as far as the patients or clients that I've had these conversations with, were told by their medical doctor that, oh, they told me my D level was fine. And then I look at their test result and they've got, 35. And
Right,
I'm
right,
like, no, your D level's not even remotely fine.
right.
Um,
Well, it's
I
better than the ones I've seen. Some people have like
Whoa,
under
yeah,
10.
yeah,
Some
absolutely. I mean,
disaster.
most of them were below 20 for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I did meet one woman, and this is very recent too, who had a test result come back, and her vitamin D level was over 100. And I'm
Wow.
like, I said, you know what? I would like to get that retested because
I don't think that's real.
I think there was an error there. I've never seen anybody have a vitamin
Unless
D.
she's supplementing and is in the sun all the time.
Well, she was supplementing for sure, but still, I mean, it was
Yeah,
like
that's
120 or something like that. And I've never seen a vitamin
wow.
D level like that ever. So that to me just showed that there was probably an error. So
Was
I
it? Was there?
I haven't seen yet this, because
Oh,
this was
yeah.
very recent. This was like only like a couple of weeks ago. So
Yeah. 50, 60 is, your
yeah,
lifeguards. They're out in the sun all the time. Right.
yep,
So yeah, that's what you really want to be at.
yeah,
But we don't look at that
no,
generally, right? And
yeah,
so, and the magnesium levels and iodine levels, all these types of things, we're not doing well in at all. Instead of addressing those things, we go, back to the shots. Shots
yeah.
will fix everything.
Well, I mean, was it Kennedy or somebody was saying that they wanted to try and make it mandatory for medical colleges to teach nutrition. And although I get what they're saying with that, because
Yeah, yeah.
average physician doesn't know shit about nutrition, I would rather them focus on maybe opening up their minds in college to be more accepting of alternative
Well,
type things, and leave the nutrition to people like myself who know
right.
how to do nutrition, as opposed to
Sure.
half-assing it.
Well, I would look at it this way is to empower the population to say,
Sure.
hey, your health is in your hands.
Yeah.
Go out, exercise. You got to lose that weight. You got to
Yeah.
eat properly. You got to eat a rounded diet with lots of nutrients, not McDonald's and Coca-Cola.
Right.
These things are bad, right? And then you want to make sure you're centered. You're not stressing about every darn thing.
Hmm.
And, all these things to empower people at a local level, because once you do that, then they don't get sick or don't get sick as much. And then you don't need the whole system in the first place. You don't
Indeed.
need other people to tell you, well, maybe you shouldn't have McDonald's, right? So, you know, the medical system is, upside down. We should be in charge of our health. People should be. That's the way I look at it. and
No
not
argument.
not telling doctors to teach their patients to, well,
Absolutely.
exercise and eat right. If you
Yeah.
did that, then you wouldn't need the medical. I haven't seen a
Yeah. You wouldn't
doctor
be
in
going to the
7 years.
doctor in the first
Yeah,
place, right? Yeah.
I don't even go.
Yeah.
I haven't gone in 7 years.
Yeah.
Before that, it was like, oh, I guess I should go once a year. And it's like,
I'll tell you what we do, and this has been the habit in my family for with my wife and my kids. Uh, we do a yearly visit to our primary physician, and when we go in, we basically just tell them we're here to check in with you just to keep this relationship established.
right.
Because that way, if there's an emergency and I have to go to an emergency room for God's sake, for whatever, heaven
Yeah,
forbid, something happens, they want you to have a primary and have a relationship. And
right.
so I go once a year just to have that
Sure.
relationship established, but that's it. Otherwise, we don't go. I mean, we don't go to medical physicians. We go there just to keep the relationship. That's it.
Oh, yeah. I didn't bother with that. And I was like, I'll
Yeah.
take my chances. I mean, the only reason I'm going to go to a hospital is like a car accident, that's something along that lines. Most things I wouldn't go. Um, for example, so my current wife is a naturopath from Australia.
Ah, okay.
And I know some stuff myself, but she's really top notch. And I had cleaned out gutters in my house, not thinking, and I scratched my hand really badly, and a bunch of stuff went in there, kind of like old school vaccination. I just cut my hand and put stuff in it, and I didn't think about it because I was focused on the job, and then I forgot about it. 5 days later, I was shaking and feverish, and I had swollen
Uh,
body parts, and I was not doing well. And she sees my hand and sees the lines going up. She goes, "Oh, you got blood poisoning." That's okay, I got it. And she gave me high quality echinacea and golden seal and a bunch of other stuff. 24 hours later, I was perfectly fine.
there you go.
So plant medicines, which we don't pay attention to, are something that we could all look at instead of just running to the medical system. So if we knew that on top of basic health, you know, the whole system would kind of not be as necessary.
100%. Yeah. Totally agree with you. 100%. I right now
Oops, I skipped that.
yeah after after COVID, sometime in the pandemic, uh, we reduced our office to a part-time office, and I started doing health coaching with the Pampa program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Pampa
No, I'm
program.
not familiar with that.
Dr. Pampa has a detox, and so basically I'm a health coach with them, and that's what
Sure.
I do online. And what I say over and over again, we are as a company, the company is very, very busy. We have a lot of clients. And of course, that's great for the company. But what it also says is it shows how sick this country is.
Sure.
Because we have some of the sickest of the sick coming in as clients, and
Well, yeah. I
and
mean,
we do a great job with them.
how could you be healthy in this society?
It's incredibly
You're inside all day. You're
yeah,
on the computer. I'm on the computer right now, but you know what I mean. You're on the computer all day. You don't go outside. You don't get exercise. You're not exposed to nature. You're stressed out of your mind. You're eating
yep,
garbage food. You take a bunch of medications to compensate. Oh, what's going to happen? You end up a disaster.
yeah.
And if that goes on for long enough, then you're a big disaster. And then you're like, what am I going to do now? I'll
And
take.
all the things that do create health, like you're talking about, cost far more than the things that, all the medications and the cheap food, that stuff's down
Well,
here
a lot of
economically.
it's free. Sunshine's free. Clean
Yes.
water is somewhat
Yes.
free, unless you're in a bad area.
Yeah.
Exercise, you don't have to go to a gym. You can go for
Correct.
walks. You can go bike riding. How much does a bike cost?
Correct.
Eating whole foods is not as expensive as eating just garbage. I usually add like ground flaxseed to my foods and stuff like that. A whole bunch of stuff like that, and it's not horribly expensive. Of course, you can make it expensive. All sorts of designer organic foods and stuff like that, but you don't have to do that. And even if you're not eating organic, eat just a whole potato. You don't have to have French fries or, potato chips. There's a lot of whole foods aren't that hard to get at. But you need to eat these types of things, but they're no, they're not sexy and fancy, and they're not at some junk food restaurant. And so you think, oh, that's fun. We've been programmed to think eating is supposed to be some kind of like exciting, fun time. It's like, oh, here's Coca-Cola, Coke and a smile, and here's McDonald's with happy hamburger talking entities, and this is all fun, yay, 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 and it's just whittling away at your health. Doesn't mean you can't
100%.
enjoy a nice meal, but you don't have to be, conned into eating a bunch of garbage.
100%. Yeah. That's unfortunately the society that we live in now. So, um, but you're right. Personal choice in what we choose to do with our health and our nutrition, that's got to be the foundation of everything.
Yeah, and it's just not being done, and there's no incentive for these industries to do that because we're a money-based society. So everything is about the money and profits, and anything that has to do with actually preventing problems isn't really something to be,
Yeah.
made into profit.
Right.
I mean,
They
sure,
can't profit
you
from
could
it, so
you
don't
could
it?
you can own a gym, so then you're helping people that way. But a lot of, you could have a nice organic restaurant, okay, but basically all these other interventions are, who's going to
Yeah.
do that? No one's going to do it. And we've created a whole legal system about supporting all these industries and looking for the next vaccine. Oh, mRNA. Yeah, let's screw around with somebody's RNA. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And no one's ever held accountable, which is very interesting. If I go out and I make Roman's jam and I put arsenic in it because I think it's great, and I kill a couple people, I'm going to go to jail forever. It's like, oh,
Roman's
but
arsenic jam.
yeah, but people liked it and they bought it and I put the ingredients on the list. Oh, well, you're going to jail. But these guys can kill as many people as they want. And it just, well, oh, well,
Yeah.
that's, we didn't see that in our studies, or that's acceptable risk, and da 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 da. It's like, it's crazy.
Well, that has always been one of the many points. Uh, my book is Vaccines Point by Point. So one of the points is this trust, this seeming there's no thinking process to it. You just trust unconditionally these gigantic companies, these corporations
Yeah.
that if you look at their record, you're talking about looking up statistics and things. It's easy to find the dozens and dozens and dozens of lawsuits
Yeah,
that these
against like
companies
Pfizer. Yeah.
oh my God, that they've had, the billions of dollars that they've had to pay out. Pfizer and any of the other pharmaceutical companies, all of them, every single one of them has had to pay out millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they are sued repetitively. And most of the time, almost every single one of those lawsuits, they were shown in court to have known all along what the problem was and ignored it.
Well,
And
because that works.
well,
You can get
exactly.
away with it.
But these are the people. This is who they're trusting. This is who
Well,
the average
it's
population is trusting, is these
it's
individuals.
kind of like our the government, let's say, for like wars. They can kill as many people as they want. It's like, okay, no problem. But if I go down and shoot somebody, well, I'm in big trouble. But they can kill as many people as they want. It's like, because we're the government. It's like,
Yeah,
if you actually held people responsible for their actions, well, this stuff would all go away. But that doesn't happen,
yeah,
unfortunately. So, and that's not going to change anytime soon because they're the ones writing the rules. They're the one in control. Regular people are not.
yeah, yeah. It's unfortunate. I do think you're right. Yeah,
Yeah, it's sad. I mean,
it is.
I used to be like, oh yeah, the government takes care of all this stuff. This is like 30 years ago. Oh, okay. Anything they do, well, I guess they had pretty good reasons for why they invade a country and blow it up. But then over time you realize, wait a second, no, they don't. They're just doing stuff because they want to, and they're making money. And their reasoning is usually just defective. And here we are, we're still doing it. We're doing all these crazy things.
Yeah,
Oh, mRNA, it's going to be great. Blowing up this country over here that's great too. We have reasons for everything.
the it, you can relate to what I'm going to say here because of the long history of educating yourself with vaccines, but for those of us who were educating ourselves on this type of vaccine stuff, like you said, from the 90s, what happened during the pandemic wasn't a surprise. I was not shocked or surprised by anything that happened during the pandemic because for me, I saw it coming in what was already happening with vaccines. We were listening to NPR in the early 2000s and listening to them lie to us already. And
Yeah.
they were lying. So the media was already lying about this topic. And so if they could lie about this topic, they can lie about everything. And
Well,
so,
that's the thing. Yeah. That's why
yeah,
trust in government is like, well, I don't know, -10. So
yeah,
it's basically zero for most people. And except for one guy who called it the boomer TV. People, older crowd watch boomer TV, Fox and CNN and he called it boomer TV, which
yeah,
I thought was
yeah,
funny. Um, yeah, people watch that and it's a load of crap most of the time. It's like, don't watch that.
yeah.
But there's people on, podcasts too that tell people a bunch of crap too. But
Well, true. Not on this one, though.
no, not definitely not in this one, except for some crazy lunatic from Connecticut.
We'll continue with where you were with this.
Well, I don't know how much time we have.
So we are probably right around another 25 minutes or so.
Yeah, I probably don't want to start a new section because it can get involved. So I could also, I could talk about the history of how things were horrible, what changed. That's another section.
Let me ask you this. I know you said this is Dr. Humphrey's specialty, but I'm assuming you know enough about it to at least touch upon it, and that is the history of polio.
Well, yeah,
Brief.
let's.
I know it's a huge topic to unravel,
Well,
but
I have a bunch of slides for that will just get people to think.
yeah.
I think so. I guess let's just fast forward it. Oh, here we go. Polio. So here's a classic look at polio, right? And
Yeah.
this is an interesting quote from Fred Klenner in 52. And he said, little mention is given to rheumatic fever, yet rheumatic fever cripples more children each year than does polio. The ratio being 10-1 for infection, 3-1 for crippling. So he's commenting it's because people get crippled. That's why you know about it. These other things you don't see, so therefore it's not that important. So it's a kind of a visual thing, and a lot of this stuff was made visual. There was a big panic for in 1916 in New York City. People were actually leaving the city because they were afraid of polio. But it's just a fear, right? Now, polio itself was a very low incidence disease. So you see here at the very bottom, that's polio,
Mm.
barely registers. Measles is a much higher disease. And what's interesting is you have malaria in the United States, syphilis, and these other diseases are much higher incidence, but people don't remember, syphilis or malaria. Here in Vermont, 1910, incidence of paralysis. And the little red dots are the incidence of paralysis. Very widespread. There's no big epicenter. It's just all spread out. It's just cases here and there. So it's not like there's a big epicenter in some city and it just spreads everywhere. As you might imagine, if this was a big epidemic of disease. Again, in Vermont, 1912, there's a few cases here and there. It's not everywhere. It's very widespread. Interesting chart for 1916 and 1931 of cases of polio. And what's interesting is, so this is New York City. So at the peak in 1916, you have 232 cases in a whole city.
Huh.
In 1931, it was 111 cases. Not huge, like massive epidemic. These are cases. And the other interesting thing is it peaks in the summer and virtually goes to zero in the winter. Hardly seems like a highly infectious disease that's spread all the time. So it's basically a summer related disease.
Interesting. I didn't know that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? You know, you would think it was like consistent throughout the year and,
Yeah, you would
high
think that,
case rate, but it wasn't.
especially with the way they talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very much spread out and it was pretty rare and it happened mostly in the summer, which makes you think, well, that doesn't make any sense for like a virus, right?
Right. Right.
And this is a particular statement in 1938. It's definitely not highly infectious. Until recently, cases were nursed from the start in general wards of general hospitals. There have been no authenticated cases of infectious with contacts. So they had people sleeping, in proximity. And during this time, other children had been sleeping every night in the same bed as paralyzed child. And in no case was one of these contacts affected later.
Interesting.
So in this particular statement, they're saying, well, it didn't pass around. It certainly wasn't obvious that anything was being passed around. 1951, he's talking about polio. Never a doctor, intern, or nurse or anybody contracted polio within a period of 35 years in this hospital. Well, that's pretty amazing. You would think that, well, this easily spreads. Yeah, people get paralyzed all the time. That's not what happened.
Hmm.
What was happening in the early 1900s, they were using lead arsenate. They were spraying it onto fruits and vegetables during the spring and summer months. And so they didn't wash that stuff off. You would get apples, and depending on how much you ate, you would eat this lead arsenate, and that causes paralysis. So who knows how many people were getting this type of problem from spraying against these codling moths, which were wiping out crops. So they didn't know what they didn't know, so they were just spraying this stuff on to protect their crops, and then people would eat it. So how many people obtained lead arsenate and actually ended up paralyzed because of the lead arsenate? And here you can say, this is actually saying what lead arsenate does. The third phase of chronic arsenical intoxication is marked by peripheral neuritis, which is often mild at first, but which may progress to motor, in more severe cases, paralysis.
Hmm.
Another interesting thing is polio is supposed to be just a man disease for people only. But this study found that at the same time people were being paralyzed, horses, sheep, dogs, cats, hogs, fowl were being also paralyzed in the same areas.
Huh.
So this particular doctor says on epidemiological grounds alone, it appears conceivable that polio is not caused by a living microorganism or a virus, but by a toxin somewhat comparable to paralysis of a tick paralysis. And then there's Sister Kenny, which doctors apparently hated. And she said, well, you know what we shouldn't be doing is taking kids to surgery, straightening out their limbs and putting in plaster casts and doing these various surgeries. And when they wake up, they're in agony. That's part of the problem. Again, medical interventions causing the problem because we always think, well, it must be the virus that's causing the problem. What about the medical intervention? So she countenanced massage, therapy, hot packs, and she had remarkable results. And this is what we currently use for, different types of therapies today, massage and hot packs and things of that nature. She started all that stuff. So she had great success, but, she was basically criticizing the medical system.
Yeah, you're not going to last long.
Well, they actually made a movie of her. I actually never watched it. I think it was in the 50s. And so here's a picture of her having success with a child, right? So her method, the Kenny method, actually did quite well. It's foundation of physical therapy and rehabilitation practices.
Yeah, I remember reading about her specifically.
And then there's Dr. Klenner, which we should all remember who that is, but we don't generally. So he cured 60 out of 60 cases, 100% of polio by using vitamin C. Introduced, well, because if it's a powerful detoxification vitamin. So, here he is. He was great success, but he was ignored.
Hmm.
And then the very interesting is they changed the definitions of what polio was when they came
Right.
out with a vaccine. Prior to 1954, you had paralysis 24 hours apart. After that, it had to be, I don't think it's in this quote, 2 months, 60 days. That's how you proved you had polio. You had to wait 60 days. Well, of course, if you change the definition so radically, what's going to happen? You have a new disease. The other one is 24-hour paralysis. The other one's 60-day paralysis, but they just put it under the same label. Yeah, so here it is. They were talking about the 60-day paralysis, and this doctor said it's absolutely silly. Uh, and it's interesting. There isn't a doctor in this room who hasn't seen a case of frank paralytic polio, which has not recovered within 60 days. What do you mean recovered? I thought you're permanently paralyzed. So you read these kind of things behind the scenes, and you realize they changed the definition. So polio in India, they changed the definition as well in 1996. Now we have something called acute flaccid paralysis. And you can read this little blurb here, but basically they changed the definition. So what you have is the green line, the number of cases of polio, and then it kind of trails off because they changed.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because they changed the definition. But if you went back to the original definition, it actually goes way up. But those are considered acute flaccid paralysis. So the green line turns into the little dotted blue line at the bottom. That's why they say we conquered polio, but the cases of paralysis would have gone up. And they estimated 640,000 developed non-polio acute flaccid paralysis between 2000 and 2017. So a lot more kids were being, basically had paralysis, but it just wasn't called polio. They changed the definition. And as they reduced the number of oral polio vaccines given in 2012, the number of cases have been going down. But it's still worse than it was in the 70s.
Wasn't there something to do with, and you may be about to talk about this, but with the DDT?
Yeah. I mean, that has another factor. I don't know if I have any slides for that actually. But here's the anomalies of polio: low incidence, wide distribution, seasonal peak, questionable contagion, because a lot of doctors talked about how it was not transmitted. And it's similar to toxins, certainly lead as arsenate in the beginning, and then later DDT. And then iatrogenic harm. Immobilizing limbs is not a good idea, but that's what they were doing. Sister Kenny was successful. Dr. Clent was successful. And then we have these various diagnostic definition changes. So then you have this perception that, well, we used to have polio, now we don't because we have a vaccine. When we didn't really think, I think we didn't really need it in the first place. I think it's been kind of something we've embedded into our culture, thinking, well, we used to have people with, these braces. Now we don't. So therefore,
the big
everything's
thing, of course,
great.
is the iron lung, right? That
Yeah.
is the big thing.
But people still end up with some kind of paralysis all the time. They just don't call it polio, and they end up on ventilators. So it's not the same technology because we don't have iron lungs anymore.
Right.
Right. So if we all stop vaccinating and start getting polio, for example, we wouldn't be in iron lungs anyway. It's just this, it's a psychological perception. So, with all these different these different things we just talked about, which you can go verify, it makes you go, wait a second, something doesn't smell right.
And the thing is, you can find this with all of the vaccines, every single one of them, that there's this background of disinformation or incomplete information, but done on purpose. It's incomplete for a reason. And so you end up with this entire history that is at worst a lie, at best a misleading, right?
Yeah, I mean, it all goes back for, centuries. This idea of there's a microbe out there, it's going to kill us. We have to stop the microbe, which just turns out not to be really true. Even if there is a microbe, that's not the vast majority of what you need to do, which we should have learned by the 1900s when people got healthier and healthier and things got better and better. But we just didn't look at that. because we don't look at the data. We don't look at mortality statistics. And if we do, we skew them. We might, so I've seen these things I rarely see charts in medical journals, but if you do, it starts, let's say for measles in 1950 or something. They don't use the full data set, even though they reference the full data set, but they basically skew it so that it looks good. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing, right? So they don't want people to question anything, and they all have their own belief system. They're all, they drink their own Kool-Aid. So even if they're not purposely lying, they, subconsciously go, well, vaccines are great. Therefore, how can we make it look great?
Yeah, it is. It's this weird thing of, we've said it so many times that we can't go back now, right? We've said the
Well,
vaccines
nobody
are,
wants to say
yeah,
that. And then if you go back to we can't touch too much on smallpox. I mean, it was, Jenner promised lifelong protection from smallpox that was easy, and there was no downside, basically. He said that in 1802 to the government. But he couldn't have known that. And it ended up not being true anyway, because that's where we invented, after a while, revaccinations, because it didn't stick, it didn't
right.
work. So they decided, well, we'll just revaccinate every 10 years, every 3 years, every
Get your
one
booster.
year. We'll do it as often as possible. These were ideas. And no one knew where it came from. They said, well, it's from the cow. No, it's from the horse. No, it's from another person who had smallpox who touched a cow or touched a horse, or maybe it's from a goat, or in India they use buffaloes. So it's, they had this whole menagerie of different ideas. And then, oh, we'll just do it from arm to arm to arm because people don't want to get it from an animal. And they did that for 100 years until they outlawed it in 1898. It's like, because it was a crazy idea. And even after they found out with the microscope to look underneath, they looked at these, this vaccine lymph, they called it. It was filled with bacteria and fungus. It's like, well, this is probably not a good idea to stick into your bloodstream. But they didn't know in the beginning. They always thought it was a vaccine virus. That's all it was in this pus. Well, they were wrong, but they kept on doing it. But once the mythology stuck, it stayed. So vaccines just became this magical thing. And in 1885, Leicester rebelled. In 1886, they instituted a government that said, no, we're not prosecuting people for not vaccinating.
Right.
And they stayed that way for the next 60 years. Vaccination rates continued to decline, and there was never a problem. And that happened through all of England. Vaccination rates fell and fell and fell. And you would think smallpox would have resurged and everyone would have died in England. That didn't happen. And what happened was smallpox became a mild disease by the end of the 1800s. And there's documented quotes and tables from like public health reports and other places that showed the mortality rate from smallpox collapsing, or comments like, well, it's pretty much like chickenpox. It's hard to tell the difference between smallpox and chickenpox. Well, you never hear about that. You always see the picture with like billion pustules, and that
Right.
it kills 1 in 5 people. Well, by 1920, it wasn't killing many people at all. So what happened? How come we don't know that part of history? So, by the 1940s, smallpox was like a non-issue, even though a lot of people weren't being vaccinated. Yeah, it's hard to believe, really.
Well, I mean, even knowing as much as I know about this subject, you still hear it and you just think to yourself, how the hell did they have they gotten away with all this as long as they have? But
It's
you go
belief system. You believe
exactly.
you believe in authorities. You
Yeah,
believe in whatever your perceived authority is.
yeah,
And doctors have had a good hold on the belief of the population, so that, hey, we're going to stick you in a lunatic asylum and put you in a crib bed where you can't move, and that's because you're crazy. We're going to do that, and that's going to help you, be better. Or we're going to drop you into buckets into a pool of water, which is called the bath of surprise, and that's going to snap you into sanity. All sorts of crazy ideas. And hysterectomy. Oh, your
no,
women are crazy. Why? Because they have a uterus. That's why. And how are we going to take care of that? Oh, we'll cut out their uterus. And that's where we get hysterectomy from.
Yeah. That was
Yes.
always one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I've taught medical terminology in college, and
Yeah.
that was always one of my favorite ones
And
to
how many people did
introduce.
how many people did they mutilate? How many people ended up in lunatic asylums because they acted inappropriately?
Yeah,
Their emotions were not completely in control. Oh, you laughed at that? Oh, you must be hysterical. I think you should go to a lunatic asylum. It's, all these types of things is, this is what we've allowed to happen. And it's only because of perceived authority figures, would be it the government or medical or whatever, right? So, well, instead of saying, well, why should I believe you? Where's your evidence? Where's your real evidence? You generally just don't do that, and everybody just follows along.
well, I'm sure you've heard it a million times, that well,
I'm a baby killer.
you're not a medical doctor, so you shouldn't be able to even talk about this. You
Well,
shouldn't be able to have an
exactly.
opinion
Sure.
about this because you're not a medical doctor,
You're not
right?
allowed. Yeah.
You're not allowed to have an
Because you're
opinion.
not supposed to be empowered in a society like this. You're
Yeah.
supposed to be just follow orders.
Well, and we give this unadulterated authority to the medical profession, that they are the arbiters of truth when it comes to health. But that has now shifted dramatically. I think in the past 4 years, 5 years, that's shifted
Yeah, there's
dramatically.
definitely been a shift because I think they overplayed their COVID hand.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was interesting because when it happened, I didn't think it was going to last that long. I thought, well, okay, a couple weeks and I'll go away, and it just kept on going. I was like, oh, whatever. So I pretty much ignored the whole thing. I would go about my day. I was out helping homeless people because they all got kicked out of their shelters. So I was out, getting some food and just talking to them, and they didn't care. They just wanted to have some place to eat and sleep.
Sure.
That's it.
Right.
They didn't care.
Right.
And I didn't get sick. They didn't get sick. Nobody got sick from this death virus that was like killing everybody. And these were
Yeah.
not healthy people. I had one lady I was helping. She only had one leg. She had like no teeth. She's like 50. And her diet was like Dunkin' Donuts with sprinkles and all that crap,
Right.
because when you're on the street, you like eat anything.
Oh,
You just
sure.
want to stay alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she had to live in a porta potty because, well, we can't let you in a shelter. You might die, but you can live in a porta potty. Great. And so I try to help people out. And, I know other people that did similar things. They were out all the time and no one got sick. So they tried to scare everybody to hide. I went to go visit my sister in the middle sometime. I don't recall exactly when. And I get in my car and I'm driving up to Massachusetts, driving along. I'm like, well, there's nobody on the road. I guess they must have declared a shutdown or something. I didn't know because I wasn't listening to the TV or the radio. So I drove all the way up. I was like, this is great. There's no traffic at all. There's like nobody on the road because they got everybody so terrified to stay inside. So, the power of persuasion, power of perceived authority.
Well, it really it was uh it was fortuitous. I For people in our position, it was fortuitous, because this has now created the beginning, at least, of a paradigm shift, and how far it goes will be the big mystery, right? But
Yeah,
it
it's
created at
hard to
least the
say.
beginning of
It's
it.
hard to say.
It's hard to say. I can only hope that it just continues. And that's why I think we have to be persistent. That's why you have to be persistent, why I have to be persistent, why we
Yeah,
have to continue
I,
educating.
I try to empower people at a personal level, or to go out and get healthy. You don't need a government to tell you what to do. It's not that complicated. Don't eat garbage. Eat whole
Yeah.
foods. And there's different concepts of what that is, but eat whole, real foods. Get clean water. Don't drink Coca-Cola. Don't
Right.
don't get all boozed up. Don't smoke. All the common sense thing. Get sunshine. Get in nature. Exercise. Turn off TV and, live a life. Don't live a life based on what other people are telling you what to do. And have good relationships, good hobbies, all these types of things. Meditate or pray or whatever, and obtain some kind of spiritual calmness so that you're not freaking out about everything that's going on. It's like, you know, and have a real life. Live a life. Don't live a life based on what am I going to die from? You're eventually going to die. Come some kind of grips with, mortality.
Nothing you can do
And
about that, right?
no, and I've become spiritual over the last number of years because I started looking into near-death experiences, and that resonated with me. So I'm okay. I'm going to eventually die. Okay, I'm not going to worry about dying from some virus or something like that because the some talking bozo on the on the TV said, "Well, yeah, you got to worry about that." Well, I'm not. Go away.
Well, I think those are good words for us to start wrapping up on here. And that is the message, like you said, that it pick a healthier life, and you won't have to worry about these things.
Well,
Get that
that's
host resistance up, right?
I think that's pretty key. I mean, once you yeah, are you never going to get sick? No, but you're going to reduce your odds of being really sick and have some serious conditions. And eventually something's going to go wrong, which might be you getting hit by a car or something. Just live your life as best as you can. Stop, worrying about everything. The worrying about it is worse than anything else,
Well, stress is the leading factor for most pathology. So,
as that doctor figured out in the 1880s.
yeah.
Don't be afraid. You'll be fine.
Well, Roman, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your voluminous knowledge on this topic. I don't know if there's anybody out there that really has uh, the understanding of this topic the way that you
Well,
do.
that doesn't have to be true. Go to my
Well, you're
Substack.
right. It
Go to
may
my
not have to be
subs.
true, but it is true.
Yeah, go to my Substack for free. You can read about these various things. You don't even have to buy the book if you don't want to.
So
So,
give me here at the end, once again, all of your information, where people can find you, where they can get more information about what you
oops.
do and what you've done.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I'll do another share.
Yeah, please.
Um, I lost you. Where'd you go?
I'm still here.
No, I just lost your window. That's all. There we go. So I'm
There it
on
is.
X, which I like to call Twitter instead because X is a horrible name.
I
Uh,
agree.
uh, and all my free stuff, everything on Substack's free. So just you can go read the articles, you can get the charts, you can get the pictures, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm on Telegram too, which I do as well. But so all this stuff is free. So you can learn about it, you can go verify it and empower yourself. Then you don't have to worry about all these things because they want to keep you afraid because then you will do what they want, which you don't need to do.
It's all about control.
I think so. Control is power and money, lots and trillions of dollars. So
Well, Roman, once again, I appreciate you coming on.
my pleasure.
I
Thank
think
you.
we got more to talk about. I can get you back on here at some other point, and
Cool.
and go down some other rabbit holes with you.
Well, I know
Um,
lots of rabbits, so
yeah. And the holes for these rabbits. That's
yeah,
the big thing.
lots of holes everywhere.
So for everybody watching, thanks for joining in, and we will see you on the flip side.